All right. Well, let's move on to. I guess I'll give my six since
Yes.
because you gave 7 and 6 in that answer, correct?
Yep. Yeah. Because
Okay.
because my six was ice hockey already. So
Okay.
yep. So
All
we're
right.
on your six.
All right. So my 6 is going to be, and this is the only basketball game on my list. Um, Although I could have thrown Jordan versus Bird on there, but that's very limited. It was just a fun game. But my only basketball game on this list is NBA Jam.
Ah, yes.
And I'm not gonna, it could be original Jam or it could be tournament edition. But dude, talk about a game that was just, it was a product of its time. It hit at exactly the right time. Between the NBA's surging popularity and home consoles finally being able to kind of hew more closely to their arcade counterparts. Um, you could go to the arcade, you could play NBA Jam, and you could come home to your Super Nintendo or your Sega Genesis, or even heck, it was on Game Boy, original Game Boy. It was on Game Gear. I remember playing it and being super jealous that one of my cousins had it on Game Gear, and it was just so fun. And I feel like it was literally on every system. I remember it came out for the
Yeah.
Saturn.
No, it
It
did.
was
And
32X.
yeah, it did. That's the funny thing. Like you say that, one of my favorite, because that's my number 4 is NBA Jam.
Okay.
So, and one of my favorite things about that game was I like, and we talked about this when we did ACW, was the music. But I'm a big soundtrack person, and NBA Jam had like some of the best like video game type music. Because it's very like, especially like when you're doing team selection or like the main menu, it gets in your head. But the cool thing with that is that like the music all sounded very similar, but yet different for this comparative to the systems and what you had access to. So like the arcade version sounded different from the Super Nintendo version, similar but different
Right.
to the Genesis version, similar but different to the Sega CD version. And so I always like that because it's almost like each system had their own spin on just the music, which I
Right.
thought was really cool.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And
And
that's another game that kind of like you said about staying power. Look what Arcade One Up released last year.
yes. And trust me, I was very close to snagging that one, but I
But
just don't have room for
I don't either.
it. Dude, honestly, Arcade One Up could just have all of my money if I had a place to put the damn system or the games. If I had somewhere to put the cabinets, my house, I don't need couches. I don't need couches. I don't. I'll line my walls with Arcade One Ups, and then I'll get those little themed stools that they have, and then I'll have one in front, and then that's where people can sit.
There you go. Yeah, nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was cool to me too with NBA Jam, and part of the reason it's so high on my list is because of what it spawned. So we already mentioned NHL hits, and NFL blitz and passing, and MLB Slugfest. I don't know if you remember that one.
Yeah, I forgot about that one.
But there's this whole genre of sports games that spawned off of NBA Jam. And I mean, you can even go back if you really, really want to. There was an old arcade game called Jerry Glanville's Pigskin Foot Brawl.
Oh, dude, it's funny. I just like read an article about that maybe half an hour before we started talking today.
Get out, really?
Yeah, I'm so that serious.
So I remember playing that game in an arcade in a hotel in West Virginia. We went for my mom's class reunion, and it must have been like the 50th class reunion or something like that, because my mom was up there, and I think it was in like 89 or 90 or something like that, and that game was in the arcade. And I remember putting so many quarters in. I had no idea what was going on, but I remember it just being bloody, and there was a spiked football, and that was enough for me. And I feel like this was kind of obviously not a direct translation from one to the other, but it was you can kind of trace a line.
Right. So I lost you there for about 10 seconds. So
okay. All right.
So,
well, hopefully that doesn't suck too bad on the replay.
That'd be all right. No, yeah. So yeah, we can again. That was my number 4, the NBA Jam or the Tournament Edition. Either one. Like I completely agree. interchangeable, both excellent in their own right. Because Tournament Edition added like the hotspots and those sorts of things,
Right. The
which were
hotspots.
very, very fun. But there's something about playing NBA Jam, which, we've talked about these games, about some of these are real easy to play and some of them you could get pretty good at pretty quick. NBA Jam's a hard game still, to me anyway.
Oh yeah.
That's a tough one. It's to be, you got to like really play that over and over and over and over. That's not one that you put down for 5 years and think that you're going to be just as good as you were back then. Like, you got to be on top of that one, to me.
Yeah, dude, I completely agree. And with Tournament Edition adding the additional players, I think that was the first one where you had the expanded, where it was I think it was like 5 players per team or something like that. Or was it am I mistaken that for College Slam?
Yeah, I don't remember NBA Jam ever having more than the 2.
Well, no, I mean you can only play 2.
Oh, you mean on the roster? Yeah. I think you're right. They may have had I know they had the additional players at that point. So yeah, I think you're right.
Okay, yeah, because I remember at one point, I feel like because I always wanted to be the home team, so I would try to play with the Sixers. And I remember at one point the Sixers, it was like Jerry Stackhouse and Clarence Weatherspoon or something like that.
Yeah.
And then I think Sean Bradley got added into it. And then when you turned him on, when you tried to use him, the game would break because your TV would be just a white screen. And, so, but I remember that the Sixers always sucked, but I was always super into the players they had because they were the home team.
Yeah. And the funny thing that you say that. So like, I think a lot of people would always try to pick the Chicago Bulls thinking that, especially in the console version,
oh yeah,
that you're going to get Jordan and he's nowhere to be found. So that actually made me think of one, and I have this in my honorable mention. Did you ever play Tecmo Super NBA Basketball for the Super Nintendo?
I did not.
So it's a pretty terrible basketball game. It's not like the greatest because it's very rigid. That's because it came out around the same time as NBA Jam. So you're expecting like that kind of play. But it's not. It's more like being Tecmo. It's more stats oriented. But it's just not a great like game experience. But it has Michael Jordan.
I remember the game, and because I remember they came out with a baseball game too. And around that same time.
Yeah, and the baseball game's pretty bad. I never cared for that one.
Yeah, I remember seeing them and wanting to try them, but I had Baseball Stars, I had RBI Baseball, which is an honorable mention on mine. And oh God, help me, I had at that point I had World Series, so that was cool. But and then, do you remember Roger Clemens MVP Baseball? Did you ever play
yes. Yes.
That's on the list of shame, but shoot, I still loved playing it because it was a baseball game.
Yeah, there's several I could think of that I'm like, don't think I'd ever have this in a top 10, but I've probably put more time in it than I ever should have.
Yeah.
So, but so that was my number 4. I'm gonna go down to my number 5. And okay. I think you and I could have we could dedicate an entire episode to this, because this was kind of like the game that you posted about that made me think about doing something like this. ESPN NFL 2K5.
That is actually my number 1.
Is it really?
It is.
Wow.
It is.
Wow. Yeah, it probably would be if it wasn't for a couple of other certain ones that I have, to me anyway. So I was like, I've got to put this in the top 5, but I don't know where to put it. So yeah, no, that's the pinnacle of modern, to me, football. Modern, I guess, 15 years ago now, but football games where you had, replayability is ridiculous. The Sports Center stuff, where they go through with all the highlights.
Yes.
Oh man. And then the fact that you added in all the MLB Power Pro stuff, where you're doing all that after the fact, has nothing to do with playing the game.
Right.
But you have, and you could speak to this a lot better than I can, but the one thing that really stuck with me on that game And I remember you're the one that told me about it, and this whole reason why I got it was, do you remember the original price point when it came out?
Dude, it was $20.
$20. Yeah. That's
It was 20
ridiculous.
bucks. Um, so that number one that stuck out to me. Now I was the idiot that went out and bought Madden as soon as it came out that year. I bought Madden, and then when I saw that and I could get it for $20, first of all, I wasn't impressed with Madden that year. I think that I missed the first extra point that I tried in Madden that year, and I'm pretty sure that was the year that they introduced those stupid ass passing cones, where like
Oh yeah.
yeah. So I said, screw it. I traded it in. I got that, and I never looked back. You know, NFL 2K5 to me is, and the reason it's number one on my list is because I still play it. Literally before I came on here with you, I was listening to the Flyers game on the radio because don't get me started on their blackout rules for their NHL ticket. Paid $65 and I can't watch the third game of the season because it's blacked out in my area. Wonderful. But I'm listening to the radio and I'm playing that. I have just finished my fourth season. I'm in the playoffs now. Because that was the 2004 season and I'm in 2008. And I still play it to this day. Like I will play that nonstop. I'll play other stuff. Like I got NHL 21. I was playing that when you guys were down here.
Mm-hmm.
And I love NHL 21. It's an outstanding game, but I'm so dialed in on this NFL 2K5 season that our franchise that I have going that I want to blow through it, get to the draft. Because like you said, so here's something. So taking it back a little bit to NBA Jam, do you remember one of the things that was really cool about NBA Jam was all of the secret codes that you could put in to get other characters in the game?
Yes.
So whether it was Bill Clinton, whether it was George Clinton, whether it was Reptile and Scorpion from
Mortal Kombat. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah.
All of those people. Did you know, and I'm sure you do, I'm sure you remember this part, but there was a mode where you were playing in you're playing NFL 2K and your phone would ring and it would be a celebrity and they would be challenging you with their own team that they made.
Yeah, I do remember that.
Did you remember Steve-O had a team?
Did he? Oh, wow. No kidding.
Yeah. So like Steve-O, Jamie Kennedy, Carmen Electra. I'm pretty sure Snoop had a team, but I can't remember off the top of my head. Now I turned all that off because I just want the franchise. But yeah, man, just all the different things, the replays during halftime, the halftime show where you go and it shows you all the stats and Boomer is running you through everything. And then, like you said, the sports centers at the end of the week, Mel Kiper Jr. coming up and telling you about people who are going to be in the draft. And it's just so good. It's just every aspect of it, even with, like you alluded to, the list of glitches that I've been experiencing as this franchise goes on, where like I can't use the first page of my playbook because I end up with my quarterback lining up in the defensive backfield and like my guards and tackles are in the I formation behind where the quarterback should be and everybody else is all screwed up. I'm having fun, man.
Yeah, no, that's what it was funny because I definitely love to go more in depth on that if I played it more. But I haven't played it in a long time, but it's like ingrained in my head on how, like, I mean, for the time, and that the bad part was that was really a one-off. Did you think about if they kept that and were able to keep that going, if it wasn't for the Madden rights, if you will?
Right.
I mean, what could that have possibly turned into?
Oh yeah. Well, dude, did you know that they came out with, for the 360 and the PS3, they came out with a game called 2K All Pro Football?
I did know that, but it had nothing to do with the actual NFL, though, did it?
So here's what it was. It was retired players. and you had to build a team. But it was kind of like, those baseball fantasy leagues, and I'm sure they do it in football too, but where you have like a certain budget and you can only have this many. It was weird. Like every player had a medal rating, so you had like gold, silver, bronze, and then like, I don't know, I guess common, for lack of a better. And you could only have so many of this type of player and so many of this type of player. But if you only had, like, if you didn't put any gold players on your team, you could have an extra silver or something like that. And that's how you built your team. And then everybody else was just random generated players.
Yeah, no, I never played that one. So
I wanted to love it. I really, truly did. And it was so bad. So bad. But I mean, I think part of it was because it was so bare bones, because it wasn't a situation where you could really do a franchise mode, where you could really do like a fantasy draft, because it was a fantasy draft, but it wasn't a true fantasy draft. And it wasn't,
right.
It just wasn't, I don't know. It didn't scratch that itch. It didn't have that same, and obviously it couldn't compete. One thing we forgot about, though, we didn't talk about with that. Well, two things really. The first thing is, you had it on PS2, right?
No, I had 2K5 for the Xbox.
Did you? Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing that, if people were playing it for the PS2, if they didn't have the hard drive, instead of getting the replays during Sports Center and during the halftime show, they got a picture, a black and white picture. Play. And then Boomer described it. But if they had the hard drive, that's when they got the full replays, because it used the hard drive to save it, just like it, like the Xbox had it built in. But if they didn't have that PS2 modem and PS2 hard drive, they just had black and white pictures. The other thing being, do you remember the other mode that was supposed to be really cool in that game?
Doesn't ring a bell right now.
There was the inside it was called QB Vision, and it was almost like virtual reality football.
Oh, that's right. That's right, because you're seeing like the view from the quarterback.
Right, and that was actually that. It didn't debut in that game. It actually debuted in, I think, it was like 2 or 3 seasons before, in the NFL 2K games. And I think even before that, it was in like Mike Ditka. There was a Mike Ditka game that it was in. Not Mike Ditka Power Football for the Genesis.
Okay, so I was going to say I had Mike Ditka's Ultimate Football for the PC, and
okay,
I don't think it was in that.
No, it was like Mike Ditka Ultimate Quarterback. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was like, I think it was specifically a game where you played as the quarterback, and it was the quarterback view. I don't think there was a way to even go out, but that was one of the big modes in that game. And dude, it was kind of brutal.
Yeah, that's again, that kind of still plays kind of testament to how deep that game was, though. And I didn't mean to blow your number one, but
nah, it's okay. It's all right.
That was my number 5. So yeah, right. NFL 2K5. Yeah.
All right. So my number 5 is going to be NHL 94.
Nice.
And so there's a specific reason. Number one, the specific reason that I picked it is because that was the first NHL game that I had. It was also the first one where they actually had the NHL license, and it wasn't, because the year before it was NHLPA 93, where they had the Players Association, but they didn't have the actual NHL license. And this is like really where the series started to hit its stride. So one of the things they added was the one-timer, which when we were playing NHL Rewind, that was one of the things that, we had to do. So, and for those of you who are listening who don't know, NHL Rewind is basically NHL 94 with all of the updated rosters, and you can buy it for your Xbox One or Xbox Series, whatever, or PS4, PS5 now. If you have, I don't know if you have to have 21 or not, but it's basically 94 recreated for the newer systems. And the one-timer was added, but they took out, because they got the NHL license, that was the year that they had to take out fighting. So along with, this being really where it all started to come together for the NHL series, this engine was used for one of my other all-time favorite games, which ended up on the honorable mentions because it's something that you can play, but it's definitely an every once in a while game. Mutant League Hockey.
Yes.
Which I love that game, but Mutant League Hockey, and then they took this same engine, used it for 95, but then they just upped the speed, and that's where they really added trades, create a player, full season mode, all that stuff. But NHL 94 was the skeleton, and that was the game that I played the most. And sorry if you guys can hear Lily panting in the background. She's wrapped herself up in a blanket, and I'm sure she's, super hot, but she also doesn't want to come out from under the blanket. So, so yeah, that's my number 5.
Nice. So I've already done my number 4 with the NBA Jam or NBA Jam Tournament Edition. So I'll do my number 3, which you just alluded to one of those variants, Mutant League Football.
Nice.
Which, again, based off of the Madden games of the time, typical EA game. But, it was the first game that I remember playing that, sports wise, yes, actually not a bad, engine to be developed on. But the fact that you could throw dynamite at your opponents, I mean, it really doesn't get any better than that. And the names of the players were excellent. Whoever developed that just knew what they were doing, and like the little quips that would come up from like the coach or whoever, just fantastic throughout it, and completely different type of game. The fact that like you could win based on the fact that like your opponent had too few players left alive, like it's just fantastic.
Dude, absolutely.
I cannot say that that's one of those games that I played a ton when I was younger, and which is kind of funny if you think about it, because for the time it was an insanely brutal game. So, and just like Mutant League Hockey, I mean, that's where the fans could throw chainsaws out onto the ice.
Yes. Well, dude, what's more insane to me than having a game for kids where the players are mow and spew puke, and Bones Jackson and the Razor Kid and all that stuff. Do you remember the cartoon?
A bit. I actually thought about that a little bit whenever I had thrown this down, but I don't recall watching it a lot either.
Oh, dude, I specifically remember getting done CCD and going home on Sundays and watching that damn cartoon and just being like, wow, I can't believe this is an actual cartoon. And it wasn't good, but I watched it because it was Mutant League, and I was like, well, hell yeah, Mutant League.
Yeah, and they, there was, I think they try to revitalize it here over the last couple of years. I had followed the original developer on Twitter, and this was, over the last 5 years or so. And they, I don't know, it was almost, they kind of did almost like a GoFundMe or Indiegogo type project to try to get it off the ground. And so I know I'm pretty sure they released something, but I haven't played anything remotely new from them, so I have no frame of reference to tell you if it was any good or not.
I can tell you it's good. I have it.
Okay, cool.
I have it for the Switch of all systems.
Really?
Yeah. And what the cool thing is it was the year it came out after the Eagles won the Super Bowl. So the Philadelphia Evils, as they're known in the game, it actually calls them the Mutant League, or it's called Mutant Football League instead of Mutant League Football. And Mutant Football League champions are your Philadelphia Evils.
Nice.
Not only that, dude. Oh man, I've got pictures. I'll have to send them to you. I did some screenshots and stuff. And in the stadium, they have the Liberty Bell, and it's raining blood, like
Oh,
in
that's
the
cool.
stadium. And so it's just really cool. They have like these big eagle statues flanking the Liberty Bell, and the Liberty Bell's in the end zone. Oh God, it's so awesome.
That's cool.
I love it though. It's good.
Cool. That's good to know. I really had not played it. I kind of followed the development of it, but just
Yeah,
for
that
whatever
was one.
reason, never bought it. So
Yeah, that was one I tracked down when it got released, and I went to Best Buy, and I'm like, "Hey, man, website says you got it. I don't see it on the floor." And he's like, "All right, let me go take a look." And they just never put them out on the floor, so that tells you what kind of celebrated release it had.
oh, that's yeah. It's like, oh yeah, here's this.
Yeah,
Yeah. Hey, maybe unless they were hoarding it for themselves. So,
maybe, but
but yeah,
I
that
love it.
yeah,
Honestly, it's I'll shoot next time you're here, man. We'll have
you
to
have to check it out. Yeah,
keep it
yeah. But
up.
that's my number three is Mutant League Football.
All right. So I'm gonna drop. I gotta drop back to 4 because because of switching things around. So my number 4 is going to be Blades of Steel.
Ooh, nice.
So another simple hockey game for the NES, but this time you could control the fighting. So my only major gripe was that you couldn't be the Flyers, or at least a Philadelphia team, because obviously there was no NHL license back then. Um, what was cool about this was the sprites were bigger, more detailed. It was still very much a pick up and play hockey game. And the one thing that always kind of threw me was it looked like it was supposed to take place in the future, even though they never explicitly say that. It just looks like it's supposed to be sometime in the future. And obviously the iconic opening, you turn it on and you hear your NES say, "Blades of Steel."
Steel. Yeah. Yep.
So not balls of steel,
No,
but
no.
blades of steel.
I played that game just to fight. That's it.
Yeah.
That's a fighting game. Like, seriously.
Yeah, couldn't have Street Fighter on the NES, which we almost got, by the way. I don't know if you know that or not.
No. That was close though. That makes sense. That's close on timing.
Yeah. But that's another discussion for another day. But that supposedly was completed, and Nintendo said no, we don't want to put it out. So, all right. So we've gone up to 4 on mine. 3 for me was Baseball Stars.
Okay. So 2 for me then. Baseball Simulator 1000.
And that's the one I knew you were going to have on your list. That was the one I talked about in the beginning that, I didn't put anywhere on my list because you were the one who introduced me to it. Again, I remember seeing it in Nintendo Power and stuff, but I never played it until I was in my 20s.
Yeah, man, I played that a ton, and I'm still hoping for a Switch release on that at some point because they do some of the Culture Brain stuff already through the online NES Classic, and they actually released Baseball Simulator, I believe, for the Wii U as a download. Which I didn't realize that until I was doing some research. But yeah, the again editable lineups, the fact that you could have power ups akin to doing some different things with but it was different because all the power ups were different. You could have like the moonshot home run balls, or your pitcher could throw insanely fast fireballs. Very very cool that you could also run like basically a full season. 160 plus games.
Oh yeah.
And the cool thing, you had different stadiums too, which I thought was always really neat. You played in outer space.
Yeah.
Which, so that's one of those games again I could pick up, play for a year or two, go right back at it, and just a overall experience wise, just a fun baseball game on the sense of, again, it had that nice cross between arcade, not the best, but the simulation aspect was pretty awesome.
Yeah, and that one, see, that my only problem with it was I could never stop myself from setting up what I considered to be a cheat team.
Mm.
And I'm pretty sure you showed me how to do this. I could be wrong, but you set up like 4 players with power and no speed. And then you set up the rest of the team just full on speed and then let them bunt and get on base.
Yeah, that was me. Yeah, because that's exactly what I do.
And I could never stop myself from doing that whenever I played it. And I'm like, God damn it, this is an awesome game and I love it, but I'm cheating every goddamn time.
Yeah. I got to the point where I was playing straight with no power up, like I was playing normal games, just because I always enjoyed the stats behind it. But yeah, because the same wheel, it's like, yeah, you can really run the score up and end those games pretty quickly if you know what you're doing.
Well, dude, and honestly, that was one of the things I always loved about Baseball Stars and about Baseball Simulator and everything is the mercy rule, which, God, you could get in some World Series 95 games without a mercy rule because there was none. And you'd be up like 20-0 in the first inning or third inning, and you still got to slog through the rest of the game.
Yep. That's a fun one. And I'm going to guarantee you that, because we already did your number 1 being an ESPN NFL 2K5.
Yep.
So I can guarantee you that my number 1 and your number 2 is the exact same game.
Oh, yeah.
So we won't talk about it just yet. We'll leave that for the thing. I do have something I thought about just before we started talking on this podcast, though, as an honorable mention that I could have slung anywhere in my top 10, but like didn't have a space for it because I didn't really think about it being like one of the major 4 sports or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you thought about this game at all either, but top 10 sports video games, how could you not include Wii Sports?
You know what? I thought about it. I really did. And I didn't put it in there. And reason being, I could not tell you the last time I played it.
Really?
Yeah. Amazing game. But I mean, all right, well, part of it too is because, you've got a family to play with and everything. You've got the kids, you've got Danielle. Peyton's not really into he's not really into baseball. He's starting to get more into it. He probably would have really liked the bowling, but honestly, we never really played it.
Yeah, I just had a lot of good memories playing that with the neighbors. Actually, well, Kyler.
Yeah.
So we would have some drinks and play some Wii bowling and just have a good old time with it. But I thought about that. I was like, man, I had so much fun playing this over the years with different people. And, but again, though, we kind of started this whole thing. A lot of these games that we talked about were of the 4 major sports. And that's more of like a breakdown. Yeah, you've got baseball and you've got bowling. But the baseball is like insanely limited.
Yeah.
And that's not even the part that I was really thinking of. It was more the bowling. The boxing's kind of fun.
I forgot all about the boxing.
Yeah, that's fun. But really the bowling, and there's the other thing too. It's like the golf's kind of fun too.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the bowling is what makes that game.
Yeah.
So
that's definitely an honorable mention game. I should have put that on there.
There's a lot of fun things with that one. But yeah, like you said, it's one of those things where it's completely different from anything else we've talked about, though.
Yeah.
There's no, you're actually like when you're bowling, you're physically like moving, like, pretty much any other game that we've talked about, you're just pressing buttons. So,
right.
But
how many do you have on your honorable mention list?
That blew through all my honorable mentions.
All right.
I had 3. I had Hardball 3, Tecmo Basketball, and then Wii Sports.
All right. I'm going to go through my honorable mentions real quick, and then let's jump into the looming specter that we both know is coming. And pretty much anybody who played sports games in the 80s and 90s probably knows is coming.
Yeah.
And this is where I threw a lot of the stuff that's not the 4 major sports. So my honorable mentions are Mutant League Hockey, Mario Superstar Baseball, which incredibly fun game for the GameCube. If you haven't played it, outstanding. I didn't really like the Wii version, but GameCube one, solid game. Love it. The Mario Golf series,
Ooh, yeah.
starting on N64, going to GameCube, and then on to the 3DS. Outstanding. Super Dodgeball for the NES. And then also on the Game Boy Advance, Super Dodgeball Advance, which was one of the launch titles. Awesome games. I've mentioned MVP Baseball series, mentioned Triple Play Gold, NCAA Football 2008, Rocket League, great
Yeah.
game.
Yeah.
The original RBI Baseball, the Tony Hawk series.
Yeah. I forgot about those.
Yeah. And then so my last two are going to be the Punch Out series.
How could I forget about those, man? I
Yeah,
played a ton of Mike Tyson's Punch Out.
exactly, dude. Between Mike Tyson's Punch Out, Super Punch Out, I didn't really enjoy as much, but I don't know if you've ever played the one for the Wii that came out.
I haven't.
That was really fun.
No, I haven't. Really, Mike Tyson's was the only one I really played religiously. I cannot stand the one that came out for the Super Nintendo, the Super Punch Out one.
Yeah.
I just don't. And it's weird because it's very similar, but it's not anywhere near the game that Mike Tyson's Punch Out or Punch Out is. So
Right, agreed. And then here's my final honorable mention, and I know you're going to be pissed when you hear it because you haven't said it yet. The MLB The Show series.
Yeah, and it's funny. I thought about those, and I thought about putting any of them in the top 10. The problem I had with thinking about those games, even though I love them, they're just, especially the more recent ones, you're basically playing something that you feel like you're there, because the graphics are incredible. The presentations, good. Really, if I had anything to complain about those games is that the commentary just gets a little repetitive, but they are just fantastic games through and through.
Yeah. And that's where I've been. I don't have PlayStation right now, but it's coming cross-platform.
Nice, good.
So
That's about time.
On Xbox. I heard it's coming to the Switch. I don't necessarily know that it's actually ever going to make it to the Switch. I don't know how they're going to do that unless the planned Switch Pro actually happens. But I am extremely excited to be able to play that on an Xbox system.
I'd steer clear trying to play that on the Switch, like you said, unless they up the up the ante on there with the Switch Pro.
Yeah. So hey, you know what? If somebody magically gifts me a PS5, I would be more than happy to play the show on the PS5. But until that happens, or whatever, I'll probably be playing it on an Xbox system. Not that I have a Series X either, but
right.
Hey, and you know what? If somebody wants to gift me one of those, I'm fine with that too.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be picky.
You mean one of the fine? What have you, 5,000-6,000 listeners at this point?
Oh yeah, that's totally. Actually, I looked at it. It said I had. You know what? Let me look at the stats. Let me look at the stats real quick because I can see how many. It tells me how many like active listeners I have. So, all right, my estimated audience. Are you ready for this?
Oh boy.
13.
Nice. Hey,
13, baby.
Hey, man, that's 11 more than I thought. I thought it was gonna be 2. It was me, you, and me.
It's got 10 unique listeners in the past 7 days, 137 plays all time, and it is available on 7 platforms.
Wow.
Yeah, man.
That's impressive.
Yeah, hey, and it even check this stuff out. So here's how it breaks down too. It tells me 28% of my listeners listen on Apple Podcasts, 18% on Spotify, 14% on Anchor, 9% on Google Podcasts, and 31% on other. All right.
Guarantee that 9% is me.
Yeah. So 60% of my audience is male, 40% is female. I don't have any non-binary listeners, which makes me sad. And 0% are not specified. But check this out. You know where my highest the highest age group is for me?
Mhm.
45% of my listeners are in the 28 to 34-year-old range.
Wow.
That's a coveted demographic.
Yeah, that's no kidding.
30% are in the 23 to 27, and then 25% are in the 35 to 44.
Wow.
So, this is giving me a lot of good information. Oh, wow. Check this out. So, all right, 30% of my listeners are on their iPhone, 14% listen via the web, 13% on Android, 3% on Mac, and 40% on other. What is other?
I don't know. Probably just undetermined. Like you can't figure out, like maybe someone's playing like through a web browser on a phone, but it's not necessarily an app.
Yeah, I guess, because I'm thinking, like, what do people have, like coconut radios out there?
It's possible. Yeah, like the
professor
possible.
from
yeah, exactly. So exactly what I thought.
Gilligan's Island.
Yeah.
So if you're out there, Professor, hey, what's up, man?
Yeah.
Why don't you send me a coconut radio?
But I'm sure that he would have loved this game, though.
Yes.
Game that we're both going to mention here, which would be your number 2, my number 1. Go ahead.
Tecmo Super Bowl.
Very good. Yeah, that's. In fact, I downloaded. I sent it to you. I downloaded the 2021 or 2020 whatever rosters because the great thing about that game is that it has such an active community that they release all these insane juiced ROMs with crazy additions to the players abilities and the updated rosters and just these really fun things. And that was the first game that I can ever remember that you could do a full season with stats with injuries and just ridiculously easy to play. But it's one of those that you could beat the computer 10 times in a row, but if you're not paying attention, you can still get beat. And it's I don't know, I think that's what makes it so fun, because it's still not quite like baseball simulator where you could just run up the score.
Right.
You could have some pretty fair contests if you were either using a like, let's say, using a lesser team against a better team. That game legitimately played out with, if your team was better, then yeah, you were gonna, if you know what you're doing, you're gonna win. But if you using like, I don't know, like the Cleveland Browns or with the original like 1991 rosters, it's a fair chance you might not do so well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that was what was, to me, what I love about it is it is a game that if you're good at it, you're going to win 99% of the time. But if you decide that you're just going to kind of take it easy or screw around, the game's going to get you, because it's just so easy for it to correct. You really got to pay attention. You really have to play the game. And like you said, 9 times out of 10, you're playing as, we'll say you're playing as the Eagles against a team like the Colts with Jeff George. You're going to beat them. You are. There's not many stars on the Colts, and the Eagles have probably what I would say is the best defense in that game and the most dynamic, or one of the most dynamic offensive weapons in QB Eagles.
Oh yeah, the good old QB Eagles.
I mean, obviously the running backs are pretty garbage. I've tried to force Keith Byars and Heath Sherman into being Pro Bowl type players, but
yeah, it doesn't happen.
It works out. The receivers are pretty good. You got Fred
Barnett
and you've
Calvin Williams.
You've got Keith Jackson as your tight end.
Yeah, yep.
Then you have Kenny Jackson, and you have Mike Quick at the end of his career, which I had thought he had already retired by the time that season was played, but I guess I was wrong.
Yeah, he's there. Yep.
He's there. He's just not Mike Quick. His name is there, but he's not, the Eagles Hall of Famer Mike Quick.
Right, and the fun thing with that game, even like you mentioned the Colts, you if you knew that game in and out, like Colts, one of the things I would always run because what makes them so bad, not that Jeff George is like he's pretty bad as a quarterback. They have no running game. Like Albert Bentley, I think, is the
Yeah,
running
yeah,
back.
yeah.
Yeah, but one pass play you could run with them, the tight end was Pat Beach, and that guy could catch everything. The problem is that like you're running like 10, 12 yard plays is all.
Right.
But he could catch everything. So like you at least had some kind of offense you could put out. One of my all-time favorites was to use Kansas City because again, you had not only
Oh,
Christian Okoye, who was ridiculous, but there was a pass play where you had a receiver by the name of Rob Thomas
yes.
who would, yeah, again, catch everything, always a touchdown because he would just run the length of the field no matter what.
Yeah.
But then also you could run short plays with JJ Burden,
Oh,
who's really
yeah,
good.
dude. You had JJ Burden, you had Rob Thomas, you had Christian Okoye, you had Barry Word. Um, on the other side of the ball, you had was Derek, not Derek Thomas.
Yes, Derek
Yeah,
Thomas. Yep.
Derek Thomas.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah.
you had weapons on the team, and that's the thing. You bring up a great point with the Colts. If you knew what you were doing and you knew the team's strengths and weaknesses, you could figure out a way to make it work, no matter what players you had, as long as you were able to adjust the playbook and you knew what players you had and what their strengths and weaknesses were. Remember when we were playing, you beat me. I will fully own that. But one of the things I did was I knew I was playing as Atlanta and you were playing as New England. One of the things I did right away was I made Andre Rison a running back. And
Right.
that instantly revitalized my running game. Now, sadly, the quarterbacks were freaking terrible in that game. Chris Miller and somebody Millen.
Hugh Millen or something like that.
Yeah.
Or Matt Millen.
No, it wasn't
I
Matt.
can't remember. Yeah, Hugh Millen. Yeah. Millen was the last name. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it didn't really matter. I wasn't really going to be able to pass the ball. Pretty sure every pass that he threw, either one of them, it was that weird like tilted up pass. You know what I'm talking about, where the ball looks like it's supposed to be just going straight up, and it just doesn't.
No, it goes in a completely different direction.
Right. So but if you know what you're doing, you have a chance to win. And that game it's not like that was a runaway victory.
No, we played what was within a field goal, wasn't it?
Yeah, we went to overtime and you kicked a field goal and won.
Yeah. Again though, like you just said though, players that you know what you're doing, Patriots are really bad in that game, but you have Irving Fryer, who again he'll catch just about anything you throw his way.
Right.
It's just getting to that point, that
right.
The one thing I did always appreciate about that game was that if again, like you said, if you knew what you were doing with certain players, certain teams, you could have the worst offense. But like I was playing the other night with updated rosters, and if you knew where like a certain spot was, like if you pick either like a linebacker, that the guy that sits like I always say 5 clicks, because if he's like the 5th selection, if you go to move your cursor around in the lower left corner, or the 2nd click where basically you're the guy like that's right on the defensive line. You're not an end, but you're just basically
you're like a middle linebacker.
Right, exactly. And if you knew how to like drop down and then right into the quarterback.
Yes.
Yeah. I played one and I got 15 sacks in a game. Like it's little things like that if you knew what you're doing, you're fine. But otherwise, playing against a human, playing against a computer, you get 1 or 2 good plays. If they figure it out on you, you're done. I mean,
right.
Yeah,
and that's my defensive strategy too, and that's what I did with the Falcons was Jesse Tuggle.
Mm-hmm.
And then with the Eagles, I believe that position is Jerome Brown.
Yes. Yep.
Is it Jerome Brown or is it? I think it's Jerome Brown.
I'm pretty sure it's Jerome Brown.
They didn't have him as a defensive tackle because they run a 3-4 defense.
Yeah,
4-3. And
yeah.
so you've got the Eagles defensive front was Clyde Simmons, Mike Golick, and Reggie White. And then your linebackers were Seth Joyner, Byron Evans, Jerome Brown, and bloody hell. Who was the other linebacker? That don't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. But, you knew if you went with one of those two middle linebackers and you shot that gap, you could always hit it right between the center and the guard and get into the quarterback.
Right.
So but that's the thing. It's all those little strategies and knowing the game, knowing that, hey,
Jesse Small, by the way.
What's that?
Jesse Small.
Small. Thank you. Yeah. Dude, and he's like the only person on that defense that I don't remember. It's Ben Smith, Wes Hopkins, Eric Allen, and Andre Waters are your defensive backs. It was literally one player that I could not remember on that damn defense. So how often have I played that game? Maybe a little too often.
So, but to me, that's again, for people that were in our generation, that's got to be a top fiver.
Oh yeah.
It's I've always pretty much every year I pick up the new ROM and I'll play it on PC, and I still have my original cartridge. It's I distinctly recall getting that game the same year as I got a Super Nintendo, and I was more excited about getting my cart of Tecmo Super Bowl.
Oh, dude, yeah, that was I was in 6th grade, and I remember people bringing the manual to school and seeing people with that, because it was the Super Nintendo size manual, if you remember.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember seeing people with it. And I'm like, wow, that's for a Nintendo game? What Nintendo game? And then I saw it was Tecmo Super Bowl, and I was sold. I needed to have it. And I remember getting it for my birthday, 6th grade, and just being so happy and just playing the crap out of it. And still to this day.
Yep, I do. I do. Like I said, I do too. I've been playing the updated rosters for several nights in a row now, and I've got kind of trying to get a season going, just to kind of play through. But we'll see how long I get with it. But now it's, to me, that's pinnacle game for me for sports. Yeah,
and obviously that game could have been number one on mine too. It's one of those ones where I put NFL 2K5 because it's more updated, I guess, and it has more to it, but it easily could have been 1 and 1A,
Yeah. Yep. No, I agree. It's a hard choice. That's why I had some issues with trying to put some numbers on some of these, because I think you said it best the other day, in no particular order, I think some of these, other than maybe a couple of the top ones for me, kind of will change with the season,
Right.
But the funny thing is, I thought about this too. All these games that I looked at, because I was trying to figure out okay, what's the newest game that I had on my list or honorable mentions, and it was MLB Power Pros. It was 2008, which was 13 years ago. It's wow, that tells you how much I value new sports games, apparently.
Well, honestly, I was thinking about putting NHL 21 on because I've had a lot of fun with it, but I started thinking about it and I'm like, you know what? The game hasn't been out for even a year yet. I'm not willing to put that on there over, other games that I've played for years and years and years.
Right.
And I have a problem putting the newer iterative sports games on there. That's why MLB The Show, as much as I love it, it's an honorable mention to me because there's not one year that sticks out.
Right. No, I agree.
And NCAA Football 2008, even though they don't make it anymore, it's the 2008 version and it's an honorable mention. NHL 94 is simply on there because of how influential it was and how much I played it, and also how long I played it.
Right. And the other thing too, you started off this podcast with it, was some of these, the different, off games that we didn't talk about. You mentioned Super Dodgeball and those types of games. but the wrestling games that we could have gotten into, or some of the fighting games even that weren't. I'm not talking about like Street Fighter or whatnot, but more of the you mentioned a little bit with Punch Out, but there's some good things with, like, not that I would necessarily include them, but like the UFC games that I'm sure that somebody would definitely be thinking of those as well. Some of the like maybe racing games, maybe more like the NASCAR type stuff. Again, not for me, but I'm sure there's something out there that's got to be top 10 worthy,
Oh,
in
absolutely.
that genre. But again, there's a sports thing for me. I just kind of, like you did, focused on the big four. So that was it for me.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We could, I mean, I know between the two of us, we could definitely do an entire episode on just wrestling games, or just other type, like you said, like UFC or whatever else. We could do an entire game on that, or an entire an entire podcast on that. But this one, this was a great idea, a great way to start, and I think something that we could do another list like this in the future.
Yeah, definitely. And one of those things that it's cool because it's so open ended, but it's funny because I thought about this. We've kind of mentioned it a couple times. You're going to kind of date yourself talking about some of these things, and I'd be curious to see what somebody thought about that was 10, 15, 20 years younger, just to see like what theirs would be. Because it was pretty evident that you and me were going to have a lot of cross, you know, top 10 games there. So,
Right.
but still fun to talk about, and really, think about some of the lots of good hours spent.
Yes, absolutely. All right, man. Well, thank you very much for being on again. I really appreciate it. And anytime you want to come on, you are more than welcome, and I will gladly have you on the pod again.
Awesome. All right, man. Well, I will let you finish this up, and thanks again for having me.
Yep. Thank you, Tom. You have a good
All
night.
right. You too.
All right. All right. So that has been the latest episode of My Stupid Little Life. And again, I am taking suggestions for a new name, because I think maybe we do need to change that up. But thank you for listening. If you have, thank you to everyone who's listened to any of the other stuff in the past. And we will be back soon enough with another episode.